It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. To know what you know and what you do not know, that is true knowledge. The will to win, the desire to succeed, the urge to reach your full potential. These are the keys that will unlock the door to personal excellence. Humility is the solid foundation of all virtues. It is easy to hate and it is difficult to love. This is how the whole scheme of things works. All good things are difficult to achieve, and bad things are very easy to get. He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. Silence is a true friend who never betrays. Old age, believe me, is a good and pleasant thing. It is true you are gently shouldered off the stage, but then you are given such a comfortable front stall as a spectator. Only the wisest and stupidest of men never change. What you do not want to be done to yourself, do not do to others. If I am walking with two other men, each of them will serve as my teacher. I will pick out the good points of one and imitate them, and the bad points of the other and correct them in myself. The superior man thinks always of virtue, the common man thinks of comfort. An oppressive government is more to be feared than a tiger. We should feel sorrow, but not sink under its oppression. To see the right and not to do it is cowardice. Study the past, if you would divine the future. To practice 5 things under all circumstances constitutes perfect virtue. These 5 are gravity, generosity of soul, sincerity, earnestness, and kindness. In a country well governed, poverty is something to be ashamed of. In a country badly governed, wealth is something to be ashamed of. The object of the superior man is truth. They must often change, who would be constant in happiness or wisdom. To see and listen to the wicked is already the beginning of wickedness. To see what is right and not to do it is want of courage, or of principle. The superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. A youth, when at home, should be filial and, abroad, respectful to his elders. He should be earnest and truthful. He should overflow in love to all and cultivate the friendship of the good. When he has time and opportunity, after the performance of these things, he should employ them in polite studies. The superior man acts before he speaks, and afterward speaks according to his action. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. By 3 methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. Wherever you go, go with all your heart. Success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there is sure to be a failure. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. When anger rises, think of the consequences. Better a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without. If you think in terms of a year, plant a seed. If in terms of 10 years, plant trees. If in terms of 100 years, teach the people. Never give a sword to a man who can't dance. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. The strength of a nation derives from the integrity of the home. Heaven means to be one with God. Never contract friendship with a man that is not better than yourself. The expectations of life depend upon diligence. The mechanic that would perfect his work must first sharpen his tools. To be wronged is nothing unless you continue to remember it. It is more shameful to distrust our friends than to be deceived by them. A gentleman would be ashamed should his deeds not match his words. The more man meditates upon good thoughts, the better will be his world and the world at large. If we don't know life, how can we know death? You cannot open a book without learning something. Wisdom, compassion, and courage are the 3 universally recognized moral qualities of men. If you look into your own heart, and you find nothing wrong there, what is there to worry about? What is there to fear? Without feelings of respect, what is there to distinguish men from beasts? He who speaks without modesty will find it difficult to make his words good. Death and life have their determined appointments. Riches and honors depend upon heaven. Virtuous people often revenge themselves for the constraints to which they submit by the boredom which they inspire. The superior man understands what is right. The inferior man understands what will sell. I want you to be everything that's you, deep at the center of your being. When you know a thing, to hold that you know it, and when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it, this is knowledge. Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. To go beyond is as wrong as to fall short. Faced with what is right, to leave it undone shows a lack of courage. A superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. Ability will never catch up with the demand for it. When we see persons of worth, we should think of equaling them. When we see persons of a contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves. He who acts with a constant view to his own advantage will be much murmured against. There are 3 methods to gaining wisdom. The first is reflection, which is the highest. The second is elimination, which is the easiest. The third is experience, which is the bitterest. Virtue is not left to stand alone. He who practices it will have neighbors. To rule a country of 1,000 chariots, there must be reverent attention to business, and sincerity, economy and expenditure, and love for men, and the employment of the people at the proper seasons. When you are laboring for others, let it be with the same zeal as if it were for yourself. Look not at what is contrary to propriety, listen not to what is contrary to propriety. Speak not what is contrary to propriety, make no movement which is contrary to propriety. He who exercises government by means of his virtue may be compared to the North Polar Star, which keeps its place and all the stars turn towards it. I am not one who was born in the possession of knowledge. I am one who is fond of antiquity, and earnest in seeking it there. To those whose talents are above mediocrity, the highest subjects may be announced. To those who are below mediocrity, the highest subjects may not be announced. Instead of being concerned that you have no office, be concerned to think how you may fit yourself into the office. Instead of being concerned that you are not known, seek to be worthy of being known. How to play music may be known. At the commencement of the piece, all the parts should sound together. As it proceeds, they should be in harmony while severally distinct and flowing without break, and thus on to the conclusion. I will not be concerned at other men's not knowing me. I will be concerned at my own want of ability. The superior man makes the difficulty to overcome his first interest. Success only comes later. The faults of a superior person are like the sun and moon. They have their faults, and everyone sees them. They change, and everyone looks up to them. The book salesman should be honored because he brings to our attention, as a rule, the very books we need most and neglect most. Go before the people with your example, and be laborious in their affairs. If some years were added to my life, I would give 50 to the study of the E, and then I might come to be without great faults. Look at the means which a man employs, consider his motives, and observe his pleasures. A man simply cannot conceal himself. The firm, the enduring, the simple, and the modest are near to virtue. Speak the truth, do not yield to anger, give, if thou art asked for little, by these 3 steps, thou wilt go near the gods. The superior man does not, even for the space of a single meal, act contrary to virtue. In moments of haste, he cleaves to it. In seasons of danger, he cleaves to it. Life of Confucius. Confucius was born near the end of an era known in Chinese history as the Spring and Autumn period. His home was in Lu, a regional state of eastern China in what is now central and southwestern Shandong province. Like other regional states at the time, Lu was bound to the imperial court of the Zhou dynasty through history, culture, and family ties, which stretched back to the dynasty's founding, when relatives of the Zhou rulers were enfeoffed as heads of the regional states, and moral obligations. According to some reports, Confucius's early ancestors were the Khans from the state of Song, an aristocratic family that produced several eminent counselors for the Song rulers. By the mid-7th century BCE, however, the family had lost political standing and most of its wealth, and some of the Khans, Confucius's great-grandfather being one, had relocated to the state of Lu. The Khans of Lu were common gentlemen with none of the hereditary entitlements their ancestors had once enjoyed in Song. The common gentlemen of the late Zhou dynasty could boast of their employability in the army or in any administrative position because they were educated in the 6 arts of ritual, see below teachings of Confucius, music, archery, charioteering, writing, and arithmetic, but in the social hierarchy of the time they were just a notch higher than the common folk. Confucius's father, Shuliang, had been a warrior and served as a district steward in Lu, but he was already an old man when Confucius was born. A previous marriage had given him 9 daughters and a clubfoot son, and so it was with Confucius that he was finally granted a healthy heir. But Shuliang died soon after Confucius's birth, leaving his young widow to fend for herself. Confucius was candid about his family background. He said that, because he was poor and from a lowly station, he could not enter government service as easily as young men from prominent families and so had to become skilled in many menial things. He found employment first with the Jisuan clan, a hereditary family whose principal members had for many decades served as chief counselors to the rulers of Lu. A series of modest positions with the Jisons, as keeper of granaries and livestock and as district officer in the family's feudal domain, led to more important appointments in the Lu government, first as Minister of Works and then as Minister of Crime. Records of the time suggest that, as Minister of Crime, Confucius was effective in handling problems of law and order, but was even more impressive in diplomatic assignments. He always made sure that the ruler and his mission were well prepared for the unexpected and for situations that might put them in harm's way. He also knew how to advise them to bring a difficult negotiation to a successful conclusion. Yet he held his office for only a few years. His resignation was the result of a protracted struggle with the hereditary families, which, for generations, had been trying to wrestle power away from the legitimate rulers of Lu. Confucius found the actions of the families transgressive and their ritual indiscretions objectionable, and he was willing to fight by fair means or foul to have the power of the ruler restored. A major clash took place in 498 BCE. A plan to steer the families towards self-ruin backfired. The heads of the family suspected Confucius, and so he had no choice but to leave his position and his home. The self-exile took Confucius on a long journey, first to Wei, the state just west of Lu, then southward to the state of Song, and finally to the states of Chen and Kai. The journey lasted 14 years, and Confucius spent much of that time looking for rulers who might be willing to accept his influence and be guided by his vision of virtuous government. Although his search was ultimately in vain, he never gave up, because he was eager for someone to put me to use. He said to those who found his ambitions suspect, "How can I be like a bitter gourd that hangs from the end of a string and cannot be eaten?" Confucius was emboldened to think that he could set things right in the world, because he was born at a time when such aspirations were within the reach of men living in circumstances similar to his. By the mid-6th century BCE, the Zhou dynasty was approaching its 500th year. The political framework that the dynastic founders had put in place, an enfeoffment system held together by family ties, was still standing, but the joints had been giving out since the beginning of the spring and autumn period, and so the structure, if not shored up, was in danger of collapse. The regional rulers, who were relatives of the Zhou king, should have been his strongest supporters, but they preferred to pursue their own ambitions.